All right, we got a Carrozzeria Hi-Point wheel from a Ducati ST4. This wheel also mounts on Ducati 748, 916, 996s, 998s, ST2, ST3, a lot of the super sports from like 2008 and up. I forgot the exact year, and a lot of the monsters. As long as they have the 25mm axle and the 6-bolt rotor pattern, this will work on a GSXR front end. So a couple main differences between a Suzuki wheel and the Ducati wheel. The Suzuki uses 310mm rotors. The Ducati uses 320mm rotors. So you will need to space your calipers out 5 more millimeters than what you would using the Suzuki rotors. And to do that, you need Caliper Spacers. And then you also need 5mm longer caliper bolts. These are titanium. I do sell these on my website. I can link to them below. So your stock bolts are 70mm. These are 75mm. And then Zoran and TBF will make your caliper spacers. Now, I'm using R6 calipers, and a lot of people do this on their GSXRs. Typically, you use a 2.5mm spacer. And since we need to space this out more, we need a 7.5mm spacer. And then how they go in a Yamaha is there's a dowel in here, and this dowel goes into the caliper and into the R6 fork or R1 fork. And then some years Suzuki's also do the same thing. These are 2016 1000 forks, and they are flat here. So I had Zoran make them with the shoulder to go into the R6 caliper and then flat on this end. And that will get us our calipers in the correct spot. The second thing is the Ducati's rotors are 10mm closer together than the Suzuki. So I think they're called Corsa Dynamic. I'll have to check. I'll link to it in the description. But they make 5mm rotor spacers that go on and space your rotors out. I got these from motowheels.com. And then of course you need some wheel spacers. I'll get the wheel on. I'll show you how I measured to get those. All right, so you can see here on this year GSXR fork, the axle slides in from this side. Now for many years, the GSXR axle it's like pretty similar in this sense, but you can see it doesn't go all the way to the bearing. So it can slide the other way. So we have a spacer that would go there, and same for the other side. But our wheel, obviously you need to know it's centered. So there's two things you can do. If you already have your brakes on the bike and they're bled, you can kind of eye it up to center them and spin the wheel and grab the brakes and kind of like center the wheel in the calipers that way. If that's not the case, I find something on the fork that I can measure between the rotor and the fork. So a lot of times you can use, say, the fender mounts. So you'll measure between the fender mount and the rotor on each side, and then you get them the same. And then you will find a way to measure between the bearing here and the fork leg. So you need some micrometers, and you'll get that spacing. So you could make, say, you could get a marker in there, make a mark on the axle, and you would measure from there to there. And then the same, you could do the same on this side. And how you would do that is you would make your mark, pull the wheel out, put the axle back in, make sure it's in the exact same spot, and then you have room to measure for that spacer. And that is how you will get this distance. But you still need that measurement there. So hopefully you still have, say, the stock GSXR wheel spacer, and you would just measure in there like that. And then if you're not a machinist, you would get all these schematics to your machinist, and they can make this. So Zoran at TWF Racing has done my spacers for 12 years, like that. So I draw them up, give the specs to him. Now, yeah, I could share these specs with everyone, but that's only gonna help people with this year GSXR fork. It's not gonna be the same, depending, say if you have 04 or whatever. If you have a 2011 up 600, 750, you're kind of screwed unless you change the bearing because that has a smaller axle. But all the other Gixxers from 96 and up, all the 1000s have 25 millimeter axle. 96 to 2009, 600 and 750s have a 25 millimeter axle. So we can see here our spacers on each side get us lined up in the middle of each caliper, and our caliper spacers are spot on. So your rotor here should come past the edge of your brake pad a little bit, you know, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters. If it doesn't, say it's in, like, it's the using words. The rotor is too far in and there's a lip. As your brake pads wear, then you'll actually have a lip, and eventually your brake pads could touch more and stop them from making good contact with your rotor. So yeah, make sure you got a little bit of that rotor showing past the edge of the brake pad. And that's all it really is. It would be nice if you could get these captive, because it is not the easiest to take the wheel on and off with that kind of spacer. So you could change your bearing out if you can find the right size bearing. But that's it.